The wind howled through the shelter walls, carrying the bite of snow and the scent of metal and wet fur. Outside, bare trees swayed beneath a gray sky, limbs scratching at the air like memories. It was one of the coldest afternoons of the year in a quiet American town few visited without reason. Inside, rows of kennels lined the narrow corridor. Dogs barked, whined, and pawed at their cages, desperate for attention. But in the last kennel, far from the others, silence. Bruno, an old German shepherd with a graying coat and eyes clouded by blindness. He lay curled in the corner, unmoving. His food bowl sat full, untouched, his water frozen. Bruno had once belonged to an elderly man who died quietly in his sleep. No family came for him. He was brought here, where weeks turned into months. No one wanted a blind, aging dog. He no longer reacted to voices, no longer wagged his tail. He had stopped hoping. 2 shelter workers spoke in hushed tones. "He hasn't eaten in 3 days," said one. "It's been 5 months," the other replied. "No calls, no interest." "I know," she sighed, "but he's still breathing." "Barely. We're out of space. You know the board's policy." She looked down. 1 more week. Bruno's ears flicked at their voices. He couldn't see their faces, but he heard everything. He shivered, not from cold, but from the weight of their words. No one noticed the tear that slipped from one blind eye. That same day, Emily and her father drove toward the shelter. Frost edged the car windows as she stared silently at the trees blurring past. Her hands were tucked inside her sleeves. Her dark hair was braided loosely. She hadn't said much since her mother died 2 years ago. "You sure about this?" her father asked. She nodded. They pulled into the gravel lot beside the shelter's fading sign, County Animal Rescue. Inside, barking echoed down the halls. A kind staff member led them through rows of eager dogs. "This one's great with kids," she said, pointing to a bouncing Labrador. But Emily kept walking. At the end of the hallway, she stopped. There, in the final kennel, a dog lay still. Older, bigger, with faded fur and clouded eyes. He didn't bark, didn't move. Emily knelt down. For a long while, neither said a word. Then she whispered, "You can't see me, but I know you can hear me." Bruno's ears twitched, the first movement he'd made all day. Her father caught up. "Emily, he's very old and blind." "I know," she said, "but he's the one." The volunteer hesitated. "That's Bruno. He's been here for months. We were discussing what to do with him." Emily turned to her dad. "He needs me," he sighed. "Honey, he might not have long." She looked up. "That's okay. I just want him to have someone before he goes." He looked into her eyes and saw something he hadn't in a long time: purpose and hope. Finally he nodded. "All right." Later that afternoon, with adoption papers signed and a blanket tucked around Bruno's body in the back seat, Emily sat beside him on the drive home. Her hand rested gently on his paw. The road stretched ahead, gray and quiet. But inside that car, something had shifted. The forgotten dog had been seen, and the quiet girl had found someone to love. The first few days at home were quiet. Bruno spent most of his time curled up on the soft bed Emily made from blankets and pillows. He flinched at sudden noises, hesitated at doorways, and gently bumped into walls as he adjusted to a world he couldn't see. But Emily was patient. Every morning she brushed his fur and washed him with warm water, whispering softly so he wouldn't be startled. She fed him by hand, coaxing him to eat, bit by bit. "It's okay, Bruno," she'd whisper. "You're home now." Little by little, Bruno began to change. He started lifting his head when she entered the room, wagging his tail when she called his name. He began eating on his own again. Emily tied a tiny bell to her shoelace so he could follow her more easily. Then she tied another bell to a string and used it to guide him to his food bowl. She taught him simple commands through sounds and touches: how to come, sit, stop. It became their own quiet language, built on trust. At night, Emily lay beside him on the rug, telling him stories about her mom and the dreams she was too shy to share with anyone else. Sometimes she cried. Sometimes she just laid her hand over his heart and listened to its steady beat. Bruno never left her side. Weeks passed, his fur grew shinier, his steps stronger. He started to play again, chasing a beaded tennis ball that jingled when it rolled. When Emily laughed, he wagged his tail harder, but not every day was kind. One gray afternoon, Emily came home with red cheeks and tear-filled eyes. She dropped her backpack and ran to her room, slamming the door behind her. Bruno, who'd been dozing nearby, stood and followed her scent. He paused at her door, whined, then nudged it open. Inside, Emily sat curled on the floor, hugging her knees. The kids had mocked her again, called her weird for talking to a blind old dog. Bruno pressed his head against her arm, then curled beside her, resting his head in her lap. "You knew," she whispered. "You always know." She stroked his fur, tears falling quietly. "You're the only friend I've ever really had." And that night, Emily didn't cry alone. The summer afternoon had begun like so many others. The sun poured down in golden streaks between the trees, and the air was thick with the hum of cicadas and the sweet scent of pine and grass. Emily held the leash loosely in one hand as she walked the forest trail behind their neighborhood, Bruno lumbering faithfully at her side. She liked these walks. Just the two of them, the quiet, the way Bruno's ears flicked at every sound even if his eyes could see nothing. She'd ring the tiny bell on her shoelace every so often, and Bruno would perk up, gently leaning toward the sound, always just a step or two behind her. Everything felt peaceful, until a squirrel darted across the trail. Emily squealed in surprise and, without thinking, took off after it, giggling as it zipped through the brush. "Come on, Bruno," she called, the leash slipping from her fingers. But Bruno didn't run. He barked once, sharply, a sound she rarely heard from him, and then she was gone. The ground beneath her shifted. She hadn't noticed the narrow slope until it was too late. Her foot slid on a patch of loose pine needles. She screamed as her body pitched forward, tumbling down the small ravine. Branches scratched at her arms, rocks tore at her knees, until finally she landed with a heavy thud at the bottom. Her ankle twisted painfully beneath her. She tried to sit up, but gasped at the pain. "Help!" she cried, voice thin. "Bruno?" High above, Bruno barked again, louder this time, more urgent. He couldn't see her, but he could hear her voice. He could smell the sudden burst of fear on the air, and that was enough. Bruno began moving, his paws scraped against roots and rocks, his nose working overtime, sniffing through leaves, along the earth, catching the trail that only he could read. His body was stiff with age, but his instincts were sharp, honed by years of love and devotion to the little girl who had once whispered, "You're the only friend I've ever really had." Down the slope he went, inch by careful inch, his legs trembling but steady. He paused only to sniff, reorient, then moved again. When the trail vanished, he circled until he found it again. At the bottom of the ravine, Emily huddled beneath a crooked tree, tears streaking her dirt-covered cheeks. Her ankle throbbed with every breath. "Bruno," she whimpered. A bark cut through the trees. Close now. She held her breath. Then, through the underbrush, came the sound of crunching twigs and the soft jingle of a bell. And there he was. Bruno burst through the leaves and scrambled toward her, his nose finding her hand instantly. He whined, licking her face as if trying to tell her everything would be all right. "You found me," she sobbed, wrapping her arms around his neck. "You really found me." But Bruno didn't rest. He turned, pacing in small circles, then stopped and barked again, this time sharp, rhythmic. He began to dig at the earth, scratching at the roots near the edge of the clearing. Then he barked again, louder and louder, calling out with everything he had left. Up above in the distance, a man's voice echoed through the trees. "Emily?" It was her father. "Down here," she cried weakly. "I'm down here," Bruno barked again, tail stiff, muscles shaking from the effort. Minutes later, the undergrowth parted, and her father came running down the slope, eyes wide with panic that turned to overwhelming relief the moment he saw her. "Emily, oh my God, are you okay?" "I think I hurt my ankle," she whispered, clutching Bruno tighter. "But I'm okay. Bruno found me." Her father looked at the dog, covered in dirt, panting heavily, legs trembling from exhaustion. He knelt beside them, gently lifting Emily into his arms. Bruno tried to follow but stumbled. Emily reached down. "It's okay, boy. We're going home now." Back at the house, as the paramedics examined her and neighbors gathered to hear what had happened, everyone wanted to know how the old blind dog had done it, how he'd found her, how he'd led help right to her. But Emily already knew the answer, because Bruno wasn't just any dog. He was hers, and when the moment came, when it truly mattered, he had risked everything to protect the girl who once gave him a second chance. That night, Emily sat beside Bruno's bed, gently brushing the dirt from his fur, whispering thanks between her tears. "You saved me," she said, "just like I saved you." Bruno, too tired to lift his head, let out a low, contented sigh and leaned into her hand. And in that quiet moment, nothing else in the world mattered. In the days following Emily's rescue, the town buzzed with the story of the blind dog who had saved a little girl's life. Local newspapers ran headlines like, "Hero Dog Follows His Heart, Saves Lost Child," and "Blind Shepherd Unbreakable Bond." TV crews visited their modest home on the edge of town. Cameras caught Bruno's shy, slow tail wags and Emily's beaming, proud smile as she sat beside him. "He found me," she told every reporter, "even though he couldn't see me. He knew." People were moved. Letters and gifts began arriving. Dog treats, handmade blankets, even a brand new orthopedic bed with Bruno's name stitched into the corner. Animal lovers across the state donated to the shelter where Bruno had once waited alone, forgotten. And one afternoon a delivery arrived with a blue ribbon and a plaque engraved with golden letters. Bruno placed it on the shelf above his bed. Despite the sudden attention, life for Bruno didn't change much. He still took slow, measured steps, still rested often, but there was a new lightness in the way he held his head, a deeper peace in how he moved through the world. He had found his purpose. Emily never let him stray too far. Every day after school she read to him, brushed his fur, and tied his special bell to her shoelace so he could follow her through the backyard. Her father, once hesitant, now called Bruno our guardian. Even the neighbors smiled more, stopping to greet the old dog and ask how he was doing. But Bruno wasn't done giving. One quiet night, weeks after the rescue, a faint scent drifted through the window, acrid, sharp, wrong. Bruno stirred from sleep, lifting his nose. Though age had dulled many of his senses, his nose was still sharp, and what he smelled sent a shiver down his spine. Smoke. He rose to his feet, stiff with age, and moved toward the front door. Then he barked, once, loud and deep. Emily stirred in her room. "Bruno?" she called. Then he barked again, louder, sharper, urgent. Emily's father rushed down the hallway, confused. "What's wrong, boy?" And that's when he smelled it too. Smoke, thickening in the air. He flung open the door and looked across the street. The neighbor's house. Flames flickered in the kitchen window. The fire had just begun to spread. Emily's father grabbed the phone and dialed 9011 while Bruno stood at the edge of the yard, barking, howling, calling into the night. The noise woke the neighbors, and within moments the family stumbled out, coughing and stunned. Just as sirens began to wail in the distance, the fire department arrived in time to stop the worst. No one was hurt, and when the neighbors learned how they'd been warned, not by alarms but by the barking of a blind old dog, they were overwhelmed. "He saved us," the mother whispered, hugging her children. "We would have slept through it." The next morning the whole block gathered in front of Emily's house. Bruno stood beside her, tail slow but steady, nose twitching at all the new smells. The fire chief knelt before him and placed a small gold tag on his collar. Community Protector. Everyone clapped. Emily knelt beside him and pressed her forehead to his. "You're not just my hero," she said softly. "You're everyone's." From that day forward, Bruno became more than just the dog who had been saved. He was the silent guardian of their little town. People smiled when they saw him pass. Children waved. Strangers left biscuits at the gate. And no matter the attention, no matter the praise, Bruno remained humble, quiet, gentle, always near Emily. He didn't need to see to know where he belonged, because Bruno wasn't just a dog anymore. He was a reminder to everyone that love, loyalty, and courage live in the hearts of those you least expect, even in an old blind shepherd no one wanted, until one little girl changed everything. The years passed gently, like pages turning in a well-loved book. Emily grew taller, her hair longer, her voice steadier. The little girl who once whispered to a blind dog in a quiet shelter became a bright, thoughtful young woman. But one thing never changed. Bruno was always by her side. He no longer walked far. His legs had grown stiff, and his steps slower with each season. The once rich black and tan of his fur had faded into soft grays and silvers. But his ears still perked at Emily's voice, and his tail still thumped softly whenever she sat beside him. Every evening, after her homework was done, Emily would curl up next to him on the rug. Sometimes she would read aloud like she used to. Other times, she'd just lay her head against his chest, listening to the slow, steady rhythm of the heart that had once found her in the dark. Bruno slept more these days, but he never missed a moment to be near her. Then came a crisp autumn morning, quiet and golden, the leaves outside rustling gently in the wind. Emily awoke and reached down to where Bruno always lay beside her bed. He didn't stir. Her hand found his fur, still warm, still soft, but still. She sat in silence for a long time, her hand on his chest, now still forever. No tears came at first, just a deep, aching stillness. When the sobs came, they were quiet, like the way Bruno used to nuzzle her hand when she cried. He had gone in peace, in warmth, in the home that had once saved him, right where he always wanted to be. That afternoon, Emily and her father buried Bruno beneath the big oak tree in their backyard, the place he loved to nap in the sun. She wrapped his favorite blanket around him and tucked the little silver bell beside his paw, the same one she'd worn on her shoelace the day they met. The grave was simple, a smooth stone marked with his name, and below it just 2 words: always watching. Weeks passed. One late afternoon, Emily, now nearly 16, stood beside Bruno's grave, the leaves swirling around her feet. In her hand she held the little bell. The sound of it, so light and familiar, rang once as she whispered, "You were never blind to me. You saw me with your heart and taught me how to love." She knelt, pressing the bell into the earth beside the stone. "Thank you for choosing me, Bruno." The sun dipped lower behind the trees, and the garden fell into golden quiet. Then, in the distance, there came the sound of paws padding across fallen leaves. A young pup, fluffy, clumsy, with wide, curious eyes, bounded toward her from the back fence. It stopped in front of her, tilted its head, and let out a soft, questioning bark. Emily smiled. She knelt down and opened her arms. The puppy leapt into them without hesitation, tail wagging furiously. She looked up at the sky, eyes shining with warmth. "Bruno," she said softly, hugging the pup close, "did you send this one to me?" The wind rustled the trees, and for just a moment it sounded like the gentle jingle of a bell. Emily laughed through her tears, and beneath the golden leaves, with a new friend in her arms and an old love forever in her heart, she whispered, "Hello, little one. Welcome home. Thank you for joining us on this unforgettable journey of love, loss, and the quiet strength of a loyal heart." Bruno's story is more than just a tale of rescue. It's a testament to the healing power of love, the beauty of second chances, and the unbreakable bond between a girl and her dog. Though he was once left behind, Bruno became a hero, a guardian, and a teacher, and his legacy lives on in the heart of Emily and in every paw print of the pup he left behind. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to like, share, and most importantly, subscribe to Amazing Paws Stories, your home for real, heartwarming tales that celebrate the extraordinary spirit of animals. Because sometimes, the ones we rescue end up rescuing us. See you in the next story.